Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick McKeown, and I'm joined by Daniel Paulson. And what we want to do is we want to introduce the concept of breathing exercises to change states. And I remember when I was in school and high school and university, and also going into the corporate world, having poor concentration, waking up feeling tired in the morning, not having the resilience to be able to deal with difficult situations. And if I was to look back at it now, if I knew then what I know now, life would have been a lot easier. I want to talk about concentration and attention span and focus and how you can use the breath to change states. And even though this is very, very simple stuff and it's based on normal breathing physiology, you can all practice it. I'll give you some of the tools here that we can fit into 1 hour. And you'll know pretty quickly. You'll know pretty quickly because the one thing about breathing exercises, if they're for you, you'll feel a change quite quickly. And I'll also look at breathing from a number of different dimensions, but keep it fairly simple. So I'm going to show a PowerPoint presentation now. I do have to admit people in via Zoom, so hopefully that doesn't cause too much of a disruption, but we're going to kick off. This is going to be based on my book, Atomic Focus, and it's looking at the tools really in changing mental states and being able to develop focus. What is focus? But focus is narrowing your attention to one thing. In life, we have broad goals and we've got very narrow goals. Narrow goal would be, for example, waking up today and deciding what are you going to focus upon. A broader goal would be what is your life's purpose? And whenever we choose to narrow our attention to one thing, it gives us a greater ability to succeed. But there can be so many things competing for our attention in the broader sense of the word. We get distracted and it can impair our focus. Now, the second aspect is looking at concentration. And concentration is your ability to hold your attention on one thing. If your mind is being very distracted in terms of a lot of thoughts coming in and out of the mind, your ability to hold your attention is going to be impaired. And if your ability to hold your attention is going to be impaired, then your quality of work is going to suffer. Any great quality of work is achieved with concentration. And concentration is that thing that has to be trained. Some people have it naturally. I've seen gifted people being able to hold their attention. I didn't have it naturally. I had to develop it. And I will also say this, that education did not teach me how to concentrate. School did not teach me how to concentrate. School did not teach me how to develop my attention span. But yet to succeed in education, you need to have the capacity to hold your attention on what you are doing. This applies to the corporate world, but this applies to every aspect of life and family life and sports and anything that we are doing. And I would firmly believe that success is achieved by our ability to determine what we want to go for in life. Success is achieved by our ability to concentrate on what we choose to go after, and also our attention span. And our attention span is the length of time that we can hold our attention. Now, if you think of the modern day, today there are so many distractions, and social media, of course, has contributed to that. And there's so many different things that are competing for your attention, and social media platforms and everything. And that's why our mind is sacrosanct. But if we develop a racing mind, if we develop a lot of thought activity, if we don't have the capacity for focused attention, not only does our productivity suffer, but our stress levels and anxiety will increase. Because the more the mind is agitated, the more it impacts our concentration. But the more the mind is agitated, the more stressed we are and the less happy we are. So these aren't just the tools for success. These also are the tools that life can be a little bit softer. And what I found over the last 20 years, the one thing about breathing exercises is that you can tap into this. You have this internal reserve and you can tap into it and you can change states. And the beauty about it is the highs don't be so high, but the lows don't be so low. And if you have a low in life, as we all will have, you're able to recover quickly from it. It doesn't encompass you. But very often, our mind sabotages our own performance, and our mind sabotages the results. And this is not about mindfulness. This is going beyond it. Mindfulness was developed 2,500 years ago. People lived very differently then. People were not eating the foods that we are eating today. They weren't under the same chronic stresses. It's likely that they had more physical exercise throughout the day. They didn't have the same competitive pressures. So I would believe that, our breathing now has got so many things that are influencing our breath from a negative point of view that you didn't have 2,500 years ago. And in that way, it was fine when mindfulness was developed 2,500 years ago, not to have to pay attention to your breathing. Now, it's not just about paying attention to the breath, but it's actively changing our breath, and it's about addressing dysfunctional breathing patterns. So I'm going back to the presentation. And is it that simple in terms of improving concentration is to clear both internal, the capacity to be able to have control over the mind and to direct your attention, or external distractions. If you're continuously distracted by your phone, by your email, there's pings going all over the place. And every time a ping goes off, you automatically, without thinking, reach for that phone or reach to answer that emails. And apparently it takes, every time we have an interruption, it takes 23 minutes to get back into that flow state. And when I'm talking about flow, I'm talking that state of mind whereby we are in a state of relaxation and alertness at the same time. To boost attention span, it's so simple, isn't it? We just have to stop thinking. Because if you stop thinking, then your mind is not going to be distracted by incessant and random and negative and often critical thinking, which is impacting our ability to hold our attention. And to develop focus, we need to set goals, to know where we're going. And to be at the top of the game is to focus our attention on that one thing. Now, the hierarchy of needs needs to be revised. And today's for modern man and woman. Maslow developed a hierarchy of needs back in the day. It was a motivational pyramid. And he talked about human beings, we need food, we need clothing, we need shelter. Today, most of us are fortunate enough that we have food, we have clothing, we have shelter. But what we don't have is we don't have deep sleep. We're half awake during the night and we're half asleep during the day. Nor many of us we don't have functional breathing patterns. So if I was to say, what are the tools to activate flow states? We have to have deep sleep. We have to have functional breathing. And then to bring in breath aware, to pay attention onto our breath, to bring in body aware, not to have our attention stuck in the head, but to be able to disperse our attention in different parts of the body, and to bring in mind aware, to know what's going on in our mind, to achieve self-actualization. And if we can get those tools in order, we can reach our full potential. But how many of us have sleep disorder breathing? We have snoring, insomnia, obstructive sleep apnea. How many of us have dysfunctional breathing patterns? Faster breathing, shallow breathing, breath holding, irregular breathing, paradoxical breathing. And how many of us are stuck in our heads? And this is a very natural thing. I was 20 years stuck in my own head. And the one thing about that is that you go through life immersed in your own thought, and it's almost as if you're drowning in your own thoughts. But when your attention is very much stuck in your mind, you miss out on what life has to offer. And when you start bringing your attention onto your breathing, and you're holding your attention on the breath, and by doing so, you're also changing breathing patterns to change states. So by changing your breathing patterns, you're not just training your breathing, but you're also training the brain. And of course, there is an interconnectedness between our breathing, the emotions, and sleep. Because if, for example, you have an agitated mind and you're feeling stressed and you're feeling anxious due to a difficult situation, this is going to cause your breathing to become harder and faster. But harder and faster breathing is going to launch you into a fight or flight response. And this in turn is going to feed back into agitation of the mind. And when the mind is agitated and we're overstimulated and we have so much thoughts going through the mind, it's very difficult to fall asleep. Because in order to fall asleep, we need to be able to dampen the stress response and to increase the body's relaxation response. So if we have an agitated mind, we have poor sleep. But also if we have a poor sleep, if you wake up after having a poor night's sleep and you wake up feeling lousy, you're going to be pretty irritable that day. That's normal. But what about people who have chronic sleep problems? Every morning they wake up feeling tired. And we cannot isolate mental health from sleep. And if we were to really deal with mental health, the first thing we should be looking at is sleep, but we also should be looking at breathing. 75% of the population with anxiety and panic disorder have dysfunctional breathing patterns, and many of this population also have poor sleep. But they go to their psychotherapist or psychologist or psychiatrist or counselor, and they do cognitive behavioral therapy, which is great, but it's not addressing their dysfunctional breathing, and it's not addressing their poor sleep. And it goes beyond even the person with anxiety and panic disorder. It applies to the school kid. It applies to the university student. It applies to the corporate worker. And one thing out there is that there is a myth about breathing. And breathing over the years, a lot of mistruths have crept into the breathing world. And probably the biggest mistruth is about taking a big breath. Because the harder and faster we breathe, the more we blow off carbon dioxide from the blood through the lungs, and this causes our blood vessels to constrict. So it's kind of ironic. When you breathe hard and fast, you reduce blood flow to the brain. You reduce oxygen delivery to the brain. You increase blood pH, and this in turn can cause arousal of the central nervous system. In other words, the brain gets agitated when you breathe hard and fast. Now, taking a few hard and fast breaths can be a stressor, but what about the person who is breathing hard and fast all of the time? Their physiology is going to be in an increased sympathetic state, increased stress response. And what we need to do is we need to dampen this. We need to activate the relaxation response. I know from working with people with panic attacks, panic disorder, and anxiety over the years, and depression, that they can find mindfulness very frustrating. How can you be attentive to what's going on in your mind when your mind is all over the place, when your sleep is lousy, when your breathing physiology is off? So mindfulness is not going to work for the very person who needs it the most. And this brings me back to the hierarchy of needs. We need to start with deep sleep, then with functional breathing, and then bring in awareness of the breath, awareness of the body, awareness of the mind. And one way to assess your functional breathing is to measure the Bolt score. Many of you here will be familiar with this. I'm not going to put the cameras on you, but you know what? I'd like you to give it a go. It's a very simple test, and it's not perfect. So give it a go and see how you get on with it. So to measure the Bolt score, you need to be sitting for about 5 minutes. This is also the controlled pause from the Biochemistry method. And as you're sitting down for about 5 minutes with normal breathing, then take a normal breath in through your nose and a normal breath out through your nose, and pinch your nose with your finger and hold your breath until you feel the first definite desire to breathe, or the first involuntary movement of your breathing muscles, and then to let go, to breathe in through your nose and to breathe normal. And your breathing following the breath hold, it should be normal breathing. And what's the significance of your Bolt score? Well, the higher the Bolt score, the more your breathing is functional. The lower your Bolt score, the more likely your breathing is to be dysfunctional. Don't worry about what you get. But if you have a low Bolt score, your breathing is more likely to be fast. Your breathing is more likely to be shallow. Your breathing is more likely to be irregular. You're more likely to be breathless during rest and breathless during physical exercise. And harder and faster breathing also increases turbulence during sleep. So increased turbulence in the nasal airway is going to contribute to snoring. Increased negative pressure during breathing and harder and faster breathing can also contribute to insomnia and also to obstructive sleep apnea. So your breathing during the day is going to influence how you breathe during sleep, but your everyday breathing pattern is going to influence your resilience. How well can you cope from a physiological point of view with daily life stresses and strains? Now, if your Bolt score is above 25 seconds, great. There's an 89% chance that your breathing is functional. But if your Bolt score is 10 seconds, 11, 14, 15, 16, 17, you see that there's room for improvement. The optimum Bolt score would be 40 seconds. Does everybody achieve it? No. But every time your Bolt score increases by 5 seconds, you will feel better, your breathing is lighter, and you will feel calmer. The one thing about this is that if you have a low Bolt score, you typically have a faster breathing pattern. And when I'm talking about a faster breathing pattern, I'm talking about the respiratory rate. So it is normal that when the Bolt score is lower than 25 seconds, breathing is faster. The breath in is fast, the breath out is fast. Breath in is fast, breath out is fast. Breath in is fast, breath out is fast. It's the speed of your exhalation during rest that determines whether you're activating the body's relaxation response or the body's stress response. If you have a fast exhalation during rest or during sleep, the body is sending signals to the brain, and the brain is interpreting that when you have a fast exhalation, the brain is interpreting that the body is not safe. And the purpose of the brain, of course, is here to protect the body, to ensure survival of the body. So whenever you breathe hard and fast during rest, the brain is interpreting that the environment is not safe. And all the brain wants to do is to get you out of that situation. But a person with a lower Bolt score, they typically have a faster breathing pattern every day, every minute, every hour, every day. The respiratory rate, for example, it could be greater than 14 breaths per minute. They might be breathing 18 breaths per minute. And not only do they have a faster respiratory rate, they can be also breathing harder. They can be breathing upper chest. And faster, harder, and upper chest breathing, the brain is interpreting that there's a difficult situation. And as I said, all the brain wants to do is to get you out of the situation. It is not a time for rational thinking. It's not a time for planning. So the very time that you want to harness all of your resources, when there is a difficult situation, you can't, because your breathing is after reacting to the difficult situation by changing to faster and harder, and your brain wants to get you out of there. So the individual who is able to control their breathing, they're in a much better position, and you can control your breath by slowing it down, by breathing lighter, and by breathing lower. And of course, the crux here is to breathe in and out through the nose. When it comes to breathing, your mouth has no purpose whatsoever. I took this from a podcast by Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and he was interviewing a brain surgeon called Dr. Rahul. And Dr. Rahul said, what I've learned from the operating room is that when I get into a tricky situation, the first thing I do is just prevent myself from hyperventilating. Now, the good doctor knows this, but why doesn't a school child know it? Why doesn't a university student know it? Why doesn't a corporate worker know it? Why doesn't a family person know it? These are simple things that we could all, do it. That whenever a difficult situation presents itself, that if we have the tools to realize that, yes, we're starting to get stressed here, my breathing is getting harder and faster, but I have the tools to counter this stress, because we all know this. Chronic stress leads to disease. Chronic stress leads to inflammation. And we have a nerve that's wandering throughout the human body, identified back in the early 1900s. And in 1913, it was recognized that when you stimulate this nerve called the vagus nerve, it secretes a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine causes a slowing of the heart. And when the heart is slowing down, the brain interprets that the body is safe. So instead of hyperventilating and breathing out fast when you have a tricky situation, always think of breathing light and breathing slow. And with breath itself, it's not the inhalation that determines the stress response, because during the inhalation, the vagus nerve steps back. It's almost that the foot has been taken off the pedal. It's during the exhalation that the vagus nerve kicks in. So if you can slow down your exhalation, you can help to activate the body's relaxation response. But if you just allow your exhalation to be fast and uncontrolled, that's going to drive you into that fight or flight response. It's not a time for decision making. You can check your own attention span. Now, I won't set the timer here, but it's a very simple instruction. Of course, this isn't going to be perfect. But at some point, what I would like you to do is you sit down and you quietly focus on your breathing and set a timer for 3 minutes. And monitor your breath, but every time your mind wanders, make a tick on a piece of paper. And at the end of the 3 minutes, count the number of times that your mind has wandered. It will be quite interesting for you. I know back in the day, my attention span was absolutely terrible. And I can remember reading books, reading articles, reading papers. And even though I had the book in front of me, and even though my eyes were looking at the page, my attention was not on the page, because my attention was stuck in my head and my attention was sabotaged by thought. How many of us are in the same situation? How many of your children, how many of you in the corporate world, you're in the same situation, that it's almost that we have been consumed by thought and we have developed the capacity to think, but we have not developed the capacity to stop thinking. Education teaches us how to break information into tiny pieces. It teaches us how to analyze. It teaches us how to reason. It teaches us how to question. It teaches us how to think, but it does not teach us how to stop thinking. And this is not about stopping thinking and switching off the mind. No, this is about developing our capacity for one directional attention. Because when you can put all of your attention on the task at hand, great things happen. But if we're stuck in our head, if we're tired, if we have faster breathing and upper chest breathing, our quality of work, it suffers. So you can test your own attention span. Of course, it's not scientific. It's just to give you a little bit of an idea. And when we look at functional breathing, we need to look at the biochemical point of view, because when you breathe less air, or if you were to do the Biochemistry method, you're breathing less air. What happens actually when you breathe less air? There's a gas, carbon dioxide, increases in the blood, and carbon dioxide improves blood flow. Carbon dioxide also assists in the release of oxygen from the red blood cells to the tissues and organs, including the brain. It's kind of ironic. When you slow down your breathing and breathe less air, your brain is increased oxygen and increased blood flow. It's also important to look at the biomechanics, and biomechanics is about whether you're breathing high and low, because if you're breathing high, again, the physiology of the body is that you're tipped into that stress response. And always think, what is the brain? How does the brain read how you breathe? If you're breathing hard, if you're breathing fast, if you're breathing upper chest, your brain thinks the body is under threat. And that's why it's important to focus on a number of dimensions of breathing, the biochemistry, the biomechanics, and also to slow down your breathing. And researchers over the last 30 years have found that when you slow down the respiratory rate for periods of time during the day, not that you need to be breathing like this all day long, but when you slow down your breathing to between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute, it's the optimum respiratory rate to stimulate the vagus nerve and also to improve the sensitivity of the baroreflex. So, for example, individuals who are not well, either mentally or physically unwell, they typically have reduced heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is an objective measurement of vagal tone. But we can increase our HRV. We can increase this objective measurement. And many of you are going to be tracking this yourselves with your devices. By breathing light, it stimulates the vagus nerve. By breathing low, it stimulates the vagus nerve. By breathing slow, it stimulates the vagus nerve. And the crux, the piece in the middle, is breathing in and out through the nose. So the hierarchy of breathing starts with nasal breathing, with light breathing, with low breathing, with slow breathing, both during wakefulness but also during sleep. And many of you, and I was included, waking up with a dry mouth every morning and feeling totally unrefreshed and not being able to focus that day, tired at 10 a.m. None of us should be tired at 10 o'clock in the morning. And when it comes to sleep, the elephant in the room is mouth breathing. Now, I'll say this because no matter what book you read out there about sleep, there will be talk about sleep hygiene. Don't look into your mobile phones. Don't be looking at your laptops. Don't be drinking alcohol late at night. Make sure your bedroom is airy. Make sure it's cool. Don't be overstimulating yourself before you go to sleep. All of these things are good. Your bedroom should be dark, should be silent, should be airy, should be cool. These are all the standard stuff we hear when it comes to sleep. But what we are missing is nose breathing. And that is the key. And I would say you could put aside all of the other recommendations and focus on the nose. And if you were to focus on that single one thing, it can help you more than the rest combined. For me, breathing through my nose and waking up with a moist mouth in the morning is the key. Now, if you're waking up with a dry mouth, there are different supports out there. There's different tapes, etc. But you don't need to wear a tape around the mouth or across the mouth if you're waking up with a moist mouth in the morning. Now, just in case you're wondering whether I'm talking about putting tape right across the lips, there are a number of different options in terms of taping. One tape that we've used for many years is called 3M 1-inch micropore tape. There's also lip seal tape. There's also our own tape, which surrounds the mouth, called Myo tape. There's other tapes out there. So, I would really encourage you to practice the exercises and to switch to nasal breathing and wake up with that moist mouth in the morning. So for a deep sleep, to focus on breathing less for about 15 minutes before sleep, because even when we look at insomnia can happen on two occasions mainly. One is you go to sleep, but you have a difficulty falling asleep. That can be due to overstimulation of the mind. So in order to down-regulate before sleep, breathe less air, slow down your breathing. And as you slow down your breathing and breathe less air, you help to stimulate the vagus nerve and you help to activate the body's relaxation response. And you will know that you're doing it because of the increased watery saliva in the mouth. You'll also feel drowsy. Increased watery saliva in the mouth, your body now is ready for rest and digest. When we get stressed, the mouth goes dry. So pay attention to the saliva in the mouth. Now we have to ask this question. If you're waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, is it a case that not just that stress causes a dry mouth, but does a constant dry mouth feed into a stress response? And I think there's a bi-directional feedback there. But of course, there's nothing really written on it. So by having increased watery saliva in the mouth, which is a sign of the rest and digest response, that can also help to activate the body's relaxation. Make sure your mouth is closed during sleep and train your tongue to rest in the roof of the mouth. So 3/4 of our tongue should be resting in the roof of the mouth. The tongue is either resting in the roof of the mouth or it's falling into the airway. And of course, improve your BOLT score, because as you improve your BOLT score, your breathing becomes lighter, your breathing becomes lower, your breathing becomes slower. And this is a recipe to help reduce or minimize the risk of sleep disorder breathing. I'm going to start off with this exercise here, and I'd like you to give it a go. I'm going to go through maybe about 4 or 5 different exercises, depending on time. Daniel Paulson then is going to join us towards the end about how to fit these into our everyday life. I like this exercise. This was made popular by the former Navy SEAL Mark Devine. And this is called tactical breathing or box breathing. This exercise helps to bring a balance in the autonomic nervous system. You don't want to be, you can imagine a soldier or you can imagine a police officer going into a situation. And a few weeks ago, I had a podcast with a police officer, former police officer, Roger Rouge. And he spoke about police officers going to a situation and they're driving at 100 miles an hour. And they're ramped up. Their breathing is harder and faster. The heart rate is harder and faster. and they haven't even got into the situation. They haven't even arrived to it. So there's a case of hypervigilance on a continuous basis, but ramped up on just getting to the situation. By doing something like box breathing, it helps to bring balance. You're not going into the situation too relaxed, but nor are you going into the situation too stressed. We want to have this happy medium. So I would like you to inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds. So whenever you're ready, to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to move on. It's a fairly simple exercise, that box breathing. And the feedback of using this, and Daniel can testify to professional footballers going out, that they often find this is very helpful in terms of achieving that flow state, that state of mind, and it's that balance. Now, getting in the zone is, in order to get into the zone, we need concentration. But the reason that I brought this exercise here is because I want to improve blood flow to the brain. Don't do this exercise if you're pregnant or if you have any serious medical conditions. But other than that, it's a pretty safe exercise. I'd like you to stand up. I'm not going to put the camera on you. And I would like you to take a normal breath in and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose, and walk for 10 to 15 paces holding your breath. And then to let go and to breathe as normal for about 30 seconds. And then to repeat it again. So we're going to go do a couple of easy breath holds first, and then we're going to do 5 stronger breath holds. So this is a stressor exercise. And a combination of doing box breathing and also a stressor exercise, you can change states. Whereas box breathing brings a balance, this is an upregulator. So this is not something you want to do last thing at night. This is something that you would do before going out into a game, or if I'm doing a public presentation. I will typically do light and slow breathing to down-regulate, but then I will do a few stronger breath holds to up-regulate, because again, I want to achieve that balance. I want to achieve that state of mind whereby I'm in alertness but relaxation at the same time, where your attention is moving simultaneously with time. And it's a wonderful place to be because the right action tends to happen by itself. You're not caught up in thought. You have the critical mind aside, because the critical mind and the thinking mind is too slow. We need to be fully immersed in the present moment, and it's fully immersed in the present moment is a recipe for creativity, for intuition, and for right action. So to try it again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold, and walk for 10 to 15 paces holding your breath. And then to let go, to breathe in through your nose, and to breathe normal then for about 30 seconds. This exercise will also help to open up your nose. And the reason that it's very important to open up your nose is because if you have a stuffy nose, you are 2 to 3 times more likely to have a sleep problem. You don't just have a stuffy nose. You also are more tired. And also, if you have a stuffy nose, you're more likely to mouth breathe. And mouth breathing is faster breathing and harder breathing. So let's go again with a longer breath hold. And only do this if you're relatively fit, you're relatively healthy, you're not pregnant, you don't have any cardiovascular issues. And if you have anxiety or panic disorder, don't do this part of it, but do the earlier one. Just hold your breath for 10 or 15 paces. So now what I would like you to do is take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose and start walking. And then go into a light jog and keep jogging as you hold your breath and relax into the breath hold and keep relaxing into the involuntary contractions of the diaphragm. Push it a little bit. And then when you let go, but make sure you get your breathing under good control. And of course, breathing in and out through the nose. When you think of the nose versus the mouth, there is no function implied by the mouth when it comes to breathing. If you were to look into your mouth and ask, what does my mouth do when it comes to the breath? The mouth has no purpose whatsoever. It doesn't regulate volume. It doesn't moisten air. It doesn't warm air. It doesn't harness nasal nitric oxide. Mouth breathing is an emergency breathing. Mouth breathing is faster. It's upper chest breathing. It reduces gas exchange. When you breathe through your nose, the pressure of oxygen in the blood increases by 10%. This has been known since 1988. And when you do physical exercise with your mouth closed, you increase carbon dioxide in the blood. How do you know? Because you feel air hunger. And the increased carbon dioxide in the blood assists with improved vasodilation. Your blood vessels dilate, and also increased oxygen delivery from the blood to the working muscles. So let's go again with this exercise. Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose and walk holding your breath. And then as the air hunger builds up, go a little bit faster and then go into a jog. And you could even go into a fast jog and keep relaxing into the body, but only do what you can do. Challenge yourself a little bit, but don't stress. There should be nothing extreme when it comes to breathing. This way also, it does help to disturb blood gases, and it does cause your blood oxygen saturation to drop. And this exercise can cause adaptations conducive to improve sports performance. But for the purpose of this, we're using it to open up the nose and to increase blood flow to the brain. So now breathe as normal for about a minute or so, breathing in and out through the nose, and get your breathing under good control. And then when you feel that your breathing is under good control, again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose and walk holding the breath. And then go from a walk into a jog and a jog into a fast jog. So as the air hunger increases in intensity, increase the movement. So always match the air hunger with metabolic activity and relax into the body as you're doing it. And the more you can bring a feeling of relaxation to the body, the longer that you will hold your breath for. And at the end, let go, but breathe in through your nose and calm your breathing. You should notice that your nose is starting to open up. It's known since 1923 that when you hold your breath, you can open up your nose. And the benefit of that, as I spoke about, is better sleep and better breathing. So now just to breathe normal for about a minute or so, and we will do it again. So we're kind of having a rest for about a minute in between each. This is a stressor exercise. And when we look at any breathing exercise, we should be asking the question, what does the breathing exercise do? So in terms of changing states, we can choose whether we want to upregulate. We can choose whether we want to stress the body and mind. The two main ways to upregulate from a breathing perspective is hyperventilate. Because remember, we said the speed of the exhalation will activate the stress response or relaxation response. If you have a very fast and hard exhalation, it's a stressor. And the second way to upregulate is to do a long breath hold. Because as you do a long breath hold, it generates a feeling of suffocation or air hunger. And you're also dropping your blood oxygen saturation. You're increasing carbon dioxide. And this is activating the body's this is activating the body's stress response. And then in terms of changing states, we think of recovery, or we think of down regulation. it's not enough just to stress the body and mind. It's not enough just to hyperventilate and do long breath holds. We have to be thinking about our everyday breathing, and we have to be thinking about recovery. And we help with recovery by looking at the biochemistry of the breath, which we will look at the moment, and also by targeting the biomechanics of breathing, and also by targeting the autonomic nervous system with resonance frequency breathing or cadence breathing, or slowing down the respiratory rate. And a key aspect then of this is your everyday breathing patterns. Because the time to look at your breathing is not when you have an event or a presentation. The time to look at your breathing is now. And the more you can pay attention to the breath and you can change your breathing to change your states, you have a tremendous tool that whenever you are confronted with a situation, you can optimize your physiology to maximize your potential for success. And I can think of the individuals going into job interviews, making public presentations, going into sports, going into difficult situations, and their physiology is going to let them down. And I'll give you an example. I remember 15 years ago, I was recruiting a person to help with administration here at the office. One young lady came in, and as she was sitting in front of me, she was repeatedly sighing, and she was upper chest breathing and fast breathing. And about an hour later, another young lady came in, and she had calm breathing. She had controlled breathing in and out through the nose. What did the first girl tell me? What did the first young lady tell me when she was sighing and fast breathing and upper chest breathing? She told me that she wasn't comfortable in the situation. Her physiology let her down. Don't let your physiology let you down, because we all will make conscious or unconscious decisions based on how the person is breathing before us. We all know as human beings that when we get stressed, our breathing becomes harder and faster. Control your breath. So now let's do another couple of breath holds. Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your nose, and start walking, holding your breath. And go from a walk into a jog, and a jog into a fast jog, and keep relaxing into the body, and keep pushing, and keep relaxing, keep pushing. You will experience involuntary contractions of the diaphragm. Relax into your breathing. And when the air hunger gets quite strong, to let go, but to breathe in through your nose. And breathe in through your nose and get your breath under good control. And from that exercise, then we will go on to the exercise number 3. So I'll just wait for you to finish the exercise, and then we will move on to exercise number 3. You can all practice this next exercise. This next exercise is targeting the biochemistry of breathing. It's purposely having you to focus your attention onto the breath and to breathe lightly to increase carbon dioxide in the blood. You know that you're doing it correctly when you feel air hunger. But as you do this exercise, pay attention to the internal temperature of your hands. It's very common with people with dysfunctional breathing to have cold hands and cold feet. Your entire blood circulation is influenced by how you breathe. You have 70,000 miles of blood vessels throughout the human body. And if you breathe too hard and too fast, your blood circulation constricts. And not only does the blood circulation constrict, but less oxygen is delivered due to the Bohr effect. With this exercise, it's a very simple exercise. I'd like you to place your attention onto your breathing, but place your finger just underneath your nose, so. And you have your finger just gently underneath your nose. And use your finger as a barometer of the airflow coming out from your nose. And the whole purpose of this exercise is to take a very soft and gentle breath coming into your nose, and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle exhalation. So your finger is underneath your nose. You're paying attention to the amount of airflow onto your finger. You're taking a really soft, gentle breath coming into your nose, and you're having a relaxed and a slow and gentle exhalation. And also use this as a measurement of your ability to hold your attention on the breath. And every time your mind wanders and you bring your attention back onto your breathing, You're not just training your breathing, but you're also training the brain to be able to hold attention. And if you can train your brain to hold attention on your breathing, you can train your brain to hold attention on any task and situation. And it's not a forced attention. It becomes effortless. You just tap into a part of your brain. And with that part, whether center of the brain or the back of the head, you're able to direct your attention. So as you have your finger underneath your nose, and you're taking a very soft and slow, gentle breath coming into your nose, and a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle exhalation, and hold your attention there. And gently soften the speed of your breathing to the point of air hunger. So the breath in is soft, but the breath out is really slow and relaxed. And breathe less air. So the volume of air that you're breathing now should be less than what it was before you started. I need you to feel air hunger. I need you to feel a sensation that you're not getting enough air. I need you to feel that you would like to take in a deeper breath. However, if you have involuntary contractions of the diaphragm, the air hunger has gone too far. And in that instance, take a little rest and then return back to the exercise. So you have your finger underneath your nose. You're taking your attention out of your mind onto the airflow coming into your nose. And take a really soft and gentle breath coming into your nose, and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle exhalation. You're gently softening your breathing to the point of air hunger. And breathe gently that you have air hunger both on the inhalation and exhalation. Don't hold your breath. Don't freeze your breathing. Just gently soften your breathing. The air hunger tells you that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood. And as carbon dioxide increases in the blood, it helps to dilate your blood vessels, but it will also help to stimulate the vagus nerve. So Bruce, if you have panic disorder, just go very gentle. And it's actually a really good exercise to do for panic disorder, but you have to go gentle. So many of these exercises are tailored. With this instance here, I'm putting it out to the general population, but it's not going to be tailored towards panic disorder. So now you can take a rest at that. Now, normally what will happen is that when you breathe less air, you'll start to notice increased watery saliva in the mouth. And there's something else that's wonderful about breathing less air. And it's not that you're forcing your breath into place. All you're doing is just gently slowing down your breath to the point of air hunger. Your mind is going to be more anchored onto your breathing, and your mind is less likely to wander. Now, this exercise here is the ideal respiratory rate to practice at different periods of time during the day to improve what's called heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is a measurement of your resilience. Now, this also is related to the length of your breath hold time. Normally, we expect people with a higher Bolt score to be more resilient than people with a lower Bolt score. Because if you have a lower Bolt score, you're more likely to be increased sympathetic drive because of faster and harder breathing and often mouth breathing. So with this exercise, I would like you to put your hands either side of your lower ribs. And you're breathing in and out through your nose. So have your hands either side of your lower ribs. And as you breathe in, you should feel that your ribs are moving out. And as you breathe out, you should feel that your ribs are moving in. And as you breathe in, to feel that your ribs move out. And as you breathe out, to feel that your ribs move in. And now we're going to start slowing down your breathing. To breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so to take a rest. So this exercise here is typically resonance frequency breathing or cadence breathing. And the primary objective of this exercise is to stimulate the vagus nerve and to improve the sensitivity of the baroreflex, but basically to help bring the autonomic nervous system into balance. Now, breathing low and breathing slow and breathing nose will also help with alveolar ventilation. It's a very efficient way to breathe in terms of gas exchange. We have to think this, that whenever we are stressed and we respond with faster and harder and upper chest breathing, it's a very inefficient way to breathe. It impairs gas exchange, but it can also impair oxygen delivery. It can reduce blood flow to the brain, and it's putting the autonomic nervous system into that fight or flight response. Now you can imagine this situation here. So you have an angry customer and you have a store clerk. The store clerk, if he surrenders his attention to the angry customer, it's really going to affect his day. But how about this? How about the customer is giving out to you, but you bring your attention onto your breathing. And as the customer is bringing out, as the customer is giving out, you're holding your attention on the breath. You're breathing in for 4 seconds and you're breathing out for 6 seconds. You're breathing in for 4 seconds and you're breathing out for 6 seconds. Now, what's the relevance of this? The relevance of this is that because the clerk is breathing slow, because his exhalation is slow, he's not going to get into a stressful situation. Now, if you had another store clerk and you have your angry customer and the store clerk is getting upset and the clerk starts breathing harder and faster, well, now the customer is after getting what he wanted. The customer is in a bad mood, and all the customer wants to do is to put everybody else in a bad mood. Because when an individual is in a bad mood, they're not just polluting their own space, but they want to pollute the space of everybody around them. In this instance, the clerk is not surrendering his attention to the customer. The clerk is bringing his attention inwards onto the breath. There's nothing new agey about this. And as the clerk is bringing his attention onto his breathing, the clerk is having a really relaxed and a slow exhalation. And as the clerk is having this relaxed and a slow exhalation, it helps to stimulate the vagus nerve, and the signaling from the body up to the brain is that everything is okay. Because the brain is interpreting how safe the environment is dependent on the speed of the exhalation. When we have that fast exhalation, the brain interprets, as I said before, that the body is not safe. When we have a slow and relaxed exhalation, the brain is interpreting that the body is safe, and the brain will send signals of calm accordingly to the body. Now, don't wait until you are confronted with an angry customer. Start with TV shows. And so, for example, if you look at soap operas, and I'm sure you'll find plenty of them, I know there's a few of them here in this country. And during the soap opera, you'll hear people, they're crying and shouting and screaming at each other. And as you're watching the soap opera, use the soap opera as a means of bringing your attention onto your breath. So you're seeing aggression, you're hearing aggression on the screen, but don't surrender your attention to the aggression. Use this as a practice of being able to change your states, that regardless of the turmoil that's happening outside, you are able to tap into that reservoir, and that reservoir of stillness. Your breath is your friend. Now, this comes with practice. Now, by the way, the clerk who's remaining calm is going to naturally calm down the customer. And as the Dalai Lama said about China, he said, China, he said, they might have taken Tibet, but they are not going to take my mind. Don't let any situation take your mind, because your mind is sacrosanct. And it's through your mind that you interpret all of life's experiences. It's very important that you retain command of your own mind. I'm just conscious of time now. This is a very small breath hold that we often use in difficult situations and people with panic disorder. And it's taking a normal breath in and out through your nose and holding your breath for 5 seconds and then breathing normally for 10 seconds. So this is the breathing recovery exercise that you would see in the box. It's a very wonderful exercise when there's an emotional turmoil, because whenever our breathing is fast and hard and labored, it's really difficult to slow down breathing. So the person who needs to slow down breathing the most will find it the most challenging. How can you slow down your breathing to activate the body's relaxation response if you're in a state of air hunger and a state of panic? But what you can do instead to stimulate the vagus nerve is to do small breath holds. It's very good for recovery. Now, normally what I do for public speaking is I take time out before the event. I don't want to talk to anybody directly before the event. I think this would be useful as well for you to give it a go. You have a public talk. You're going out to speak maybe to 50, 100, 500 people. You want to conserve every piece of energy for that talk. Don't talk to anybody before the event. Don't make any decisions before the event. And arrive to the event about an hour before you're due to talk. So you become comfortable with the environment. Go to a quiet place. Again, don't talk to anybody. Close your eyes and bring your attention inwards. Slow down your breathing and breathe light, because this will help to activate the body's relaxation response. You could do it for 2 minutes, but I've done it for 30 minutes. I've done it for an hour. And then what this will do is it's bringing me into present moment awareness. It's helping to tap into that flow state. And then I do a couple of easy breath holds. And then I do 4 or 5 strong breath holds. And Daniel will go through these in a little while. Because I don't want to go out to give a public talk. I don't want to go out too relaxed. I want to be relaxed and alert at the same time. So initially, I use breathing exercises to downregulate. But then I use breathing exercises to upregulate. But I also use them to conserve energy. And to go out on stage with every cell of the body, because I don't want to go out on stage with a thinking mind. I want to go out on stage where my attention is moving simultaneously with time and the right words happen by itself. I'm not going to go through this exercise because we're short of time, but this is looking at the popular exercise by Wim Hof. I believe it's very important that whenever you stress the body and mind by doing hyperventilation and breath holding, always recover. And we've been doing breath holds for 20 years and doing recovery breathing for 20 years. And in this instance here, I brought in hyperventilation. Hyperventilation for 20 breaths, and then an exhale, hold until a moderate air hunger, and then breathe light. The recovery is very important. Always bear in mind that whatever you stress the body and mind, always bring the body and mind into recovery, because you don't want to be just upregulating all the time. We also need to downregulate. So for flow, we need concentration, and concentration is achieved with deep sleep, functional breathing, and awareness. And we can develop our attention span. We can develop our concentration. I'm going to move on now to Daniel, and I'm just going to pass you over. So Daniel, the floor is going to be yours. So if you unmute, sorry.
Can you hear me, Patrick?
Perfect.
Okay.
So I'm just going to pull up. And so Daniel is based in Sweden, but he is more so the corporate arm than I am. And in terms of his knowledge, he's coming from former Wall Street. And if you can give just a little bit about yourself, Daniel, and then come in just to give, how would you bring these tools into somebody who's in the corporate world and to make it easy so that they're more likely to embrace them? It's all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Well, yes, I have a background from Wall Street, like Patrick said, but also from professional tennis. And Patrick and myself work a lot with football teams, but we're also expanding into the corporate world. So I see many similarities and differences between the sports world and the corporate world. And one thing I've noticed that they have in common, though, is the ability at the very top to hold the concentration. The attention span is fantastic. That's what separates most of the absolute top performers in any field. But since you see them on TV, especially now when tennis, when I saw Rafael Nadal, unbelievable ability to hold the concentration, but also when I was at Wall Street. So bringing that back to these exercises, I would say that if you want to have a great day, it actually starts before you go to sleep. Because if you don't have a good night's sleep, you're already 2 steps back. So just like we have here, you actually want to create that air hunger, breathing light 10 to 15 minutes before you go to bed. It could be a stressor at first if you're not used to it, but it actually reduces your pulse rate and distracting thoughts, which is very good for before you go to bed. And I would encourage you, after you do that, not to go back to watch television and other things, because then you get back into a distracting mind. So, but that's more of a personal preference. So this is something that you can control. So when you do it outside of work, because we're actually talking about atomic focus at work, I would encourage people to start at night and then maybe move on to the morning if you have time. And this is also tricky if you have a family with kids and everything. So I'll get in a little bit about that later on. But to start at night is maybe the best time to do it, and then to have a good night's sleep. And then the next step, when you wake up in the morning, maybe spend 15 minutes as well doing the same thing. Of course, if to reduce the time you spend on doing different things, because I know time is a very sensitive matter. Myself, I can just, Patrick has here that you can do it in the shower. I do these moderate to strong air hunger exercises when I walk from the car to the office, like 250 meters. That's how I get it in, sometimes twice a day. So that's more of a personal preference, because you want to lower your threshold to what you do, so you actually do it. So I also do a variety of different breathing exercises to mix it up. And I think you have a question, actually, Patrick, that brings this up. If you do the same thing every day, does it still have the same impact? Your body, if you do the same thing every day, your body won't adapt. It will adapt swiftly up for you if you're not used to it, then it will taper off. So you need to mix it up with intensity, frequency, the length of time, and so on. And then when you have this under control at night, in the morning, then you can slowly bring it into the actual working day with mini breaks, because most people will not have the time or the motivation maybe to do 15 minutes at work, but maybe mini breaks. And there's research that says you get impact, I think it's from 90 seconds, Patrick, with HRV, with slow breathing and breathe light. So you always affect your vagus nerve in one shape or another, but 90 seconds to 2 minutes. So you have the time between meetings, when you turn on the computer, when you walk to the canteen, or whatever you do. So these mini breaks are essential. And if you're really strict about it, you can set an alarm every hour on the hour, and then you can test yourself, because it's also important to kind of see progress. So just so you can see, I think initially volume is important to just build that brain circuitry so you actually get used to it. So I would say when you get used to this, nobody will actually see you do it at the office. You can actually do these slow breathing exercises sitting up like this, and people won't notice, because that's also something that people will hesitate to do. That's why it's better to do it at night or in the morning, maybe with your eyes closed at first, but when you bring it to the office, maybe you want to have your eyes open, because eventually that's the real world. But in a controlled environment, maybe you can start with your eyes closed to, to stay out, to leave out the distractions. So that's a little bit about that. I don't know if there's anything more to say about that, Patrick. Also, like Patrick said before, we're talking about nose breathing the whole time, almost all the time. But I always emphasize the exhale. The inhale will take care of itself, but it's the exhale. So if you're new to this, focus on nose breathing and exhaling slowly. And also to be aware that when you are stressed, the breathing will be more like this, and especially the exhale. So try also, when you actually have a stressful day, to double down maybe on breathing and exhaling slowly. So, and here, when you give a presentation, which most people don't like, closing your eyes and slow down your breathing for 5 minutes could really help. And then you do 2 easy breath holds and then some strong breath holds to kind of calibrate the stress, so you don't go from very relaxed into a very stressful state. So you kind of go up, stress your body a little bit with the easy breath holds, and then a little bit more, and then you're set to go. I don't really do it for presentations anymore, but I would do it for high impact meetings, or whenever it's important. So whenever you feel stressed, this is one way of doing it, and you can actually shorten it down. If you don't have the time, it's better to do 1 breath hold than nothing at all. So this is if you really can plan for it. But if it comes a time when you can't plan for it, it's better to do 1 or 2 breath holds than nothing. And then eventually, yeah. So do you want to take the questions, Patrick? I saw some of the questions here.
Sure, I'll have a quick look here. So what does it mean when somebody snores even with the mouth closed? You can snore through your mouth, or you can snore through your nose. And mouth snoring stops once you tape up. Now, for those of you who aren't aware with the taping,
I have it here, Patrick.
You have it there.
Yep.
It's the myotape.
Myotape.
And you'll see that it surrounds the lips, bring the lips together.
Get put like this.
So you see Daniel putting it on. Now,
Yep.
Once your lips are together, you can't snore through the mouth, and you can demonstrate this yourself. Try and snore with your mouth open, and it goes like this. Now close your mouth and try and snore through the mouth. So you can't snore through the mouth when your mouth is closed. Nasal snoring, it goes like this. But now what I would like you to do is to breathe really slowly and softly in through your nose, and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle exhalation. And a very soft and a slow, gentle breath coming into your nose, and a relaxed and a slow and a gentle exhalation. And you will find that as you slow down your breathing, that your snoring through the nose is going to reduce. So the turbulence in the nasal airway is not necessarily, it's not always completely down to the anatomy of the nasal airway. Of course, if you have a compromised nasal airway, it's going to increase turbulence, but you also have to consider your breathing, and you can improve your breathing patterns. And by slowing down your breath, there's less turbulence in the nasal airway. So as your bolt score increases, your snoring is going to decrease, but you may not get rid of nasal snoring altogether, because if your nose is compromised and the nasal airway is compromised, you can still have turbulence, but you will have less. So the whole objective here is that mouth snoring we can stop once you're taped. Nose snoring we can reduce, but we may not be able to stop it. And the reason being is because nose snoring is not just because of your airway, it's also due to the flow of breathing. We can impact flow of breathing, but we're not going to change the physical structures of the airway. Of course, we can reduce inflammation. I've taped my lips at night, and my sleep app records a couple of deep throat sounding snores throughout the night. I'm curious. Yeah, well, it's mouth snoring should be stopped once you have the mouth closed, So I wonder, is it just turbulence because of the air coming in as a nasal snore, or could it be, in terms of resistance to breathing, whereby the soft palate is going in towards the throat, or the epiglottis, or the tongue. The tongue can be falling into the airway, or you can have collapse of the throat. So you can have reduction in the flow of your breathing, sleep apneas or hypopneas, which might be picked up, but it's only a sleep study that's going to pick up on it. Thanks very much, Michael. Is it more effective to do long, sustained, slow breath, or how old is harder to make it a more intense air hunger? I'm asking because one gets used to air hunger, and does it still have the same benefits than before you started? One gets used to air hunger, but air hunger is still going to have a pretty good effect anyway. You will know by if there's any physiological changes. When you do light breathing and low breathing and slow breathing. Now, if you do light breathing, do you ever notice that you've increased watery saliva in the mouth? Can you influence the temperature of your hands? Can you influence your body physiology by doing it? And this will give you the feedback. Why not go out for a walk with your mouth closed? Why not do a jog with your mouth closed? So there's other ways of, as Daniel was saying, to bring this into one's way of life. So during exercise, I feel air hunger when I nose breathe, but not when I mouth breathe. Why is that? It's because when you breathe through your nose, Paul, the carbon dioxide cannot leave the body so quickly through the nose. So carbon dioxide then increases in the blood with nasal breathing. And it's the increased carbon dioxide in the blood that generates the feeling of air hunger. However, your breathing is much more efficient with nasal breathing, and also oxygen uptake and delivery is much better with nasal breathing. Your recovery is much better with nose breathing. Recruitment of the diaphragm is much better. Protection of the airways is much better. So if you continue doing your physical exercise with the mouth closed, the air hunger, it reduces. But don't do physical exercise with your mouth closed to the point that your breathing is excruciating. It's not about running with your mouth closed to the point that you go blue. It's about having controlled breathing with air hunger, but also having it manageable, because if you're forcing the air in and out of your nose, it'll cause soreness to the inside of the nose. So you don't want to be overdoing it either. I have panic disorder, Bruce. You go easy. We've seen wonderful results with panic disorder. I genuinely will say that, but I've also made plenty of mistakes with panic disorder, and I've put plenty of people into panic attacks. So you have to go easy. A lot of the exercises here, they're not going to suit you because it's too much, too soon, too quick. So just bear that in mind. Now if you go in on YouTube, you'll find a couple of exercises, small breath holds. Start off with them because it's a good route in. Go for a walk with your mouth closed. Pay attention to your breathing. You may find it difficult to focus your attention on the breath. Gently does it. With panic disorder, I think we can make significant improvements in control of anxiety and panic disorder, but it's a gentle approach. So, when I breathe, it's from the abdomen. My ribs don't move, and is that a problem? I suppose, Bonnie, when the diaphragm is moving downwards during an inspiration, as the diaphragm moves downwards, you should expect to have lateral expansion of the lower ribs. So the ribs should come out. There should be movement to the front and movement to the back, because the diaphragm, it's like the dome of an umbrella. So as the diaphragm is moving down, the intercostal muscles are moving out. Say maybe just a little bit of practice breathing in and out through your nose. And just moving down here. Thanks, Danny. I'm retired now, sold my company. Very good. Nose breathing is widely used throughout chi running. Oh, yes, of course. How are you? Chi running is a great complement here, so it is. And it's been around for a long, long time. So those of you who were aware of chi running and Danny Dreyer, which is excellent, and still continues, even though, he's taken the retirement. How long before seeing an improvement with hyperventilation? You're making progress based on your bolt score increasing. Every time your bolt score increases by 5 seconds, your hyperventilation is decreasing. And I'm talking about chronic hyperventilation here. So you're by practice and by bringing this into your way of life. And really the key here is, how can you bring this into your way of life? Just as what Daniel was talking about. Nobody's going to be doing formal practices for the rest of their life. But if you go out for a walk and you bring a good breathwork routine, if you have downtime in the evening, bring it in. And during the first initial weeks, your bowl score should increase by about 3 to 4 seconds each week. Normally, we would expect a significant reduction of symptoms within 2 weeks. So it can be quite quick. That's the one thing about this, you will feel it fairly quickly. And if you're doing it correctly and that the exercises are suited to you, and just kind of understand breathing exercise as well. And it's not about overdoing it, but it's just doing it accordingly and listen to your body as you're doing it. So for example, presenting to a corporate, I think it's important to do a few different sessions. I did a session here. You see, I overran as normally I do anyway, but with this, it's kind of limited in terms of time. I think one session is very important to introduce, and it gives you a good feel of what it's about, because a lot of people haven't considered breathing, and what they know about breathing is what they've heard: take a full big breath or a deep breath or hyperventilate, and it goes so much more. The potential is way more than what's normally perceived in people's minds. And I think it's important for people to experience that. Bruce, again, the small little breath holds should help to open up your nose. It's going to take you some practice. This is going to be limited to what we did here, but it should help with the understanding that when you have nasal congestion, even if you breathe in and breathe out and hold your breath for 5 or 6 seconds, then let go, breathe normally for breathe normally for 15 seconds, and then breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your breath for 5 or 6 seconds, and then breathe normally and continue to do that. It can help. And you'll find the exercise in the books as well. And there's different courses, different workshops that we do. I discovered your book, and I know that making a noticeable difference. I've made the mistake of mentioning it to my new GP, who was mocking breathing exercises. It doesn't change anything. It's just that your GP is no training in breathing. And I gave a talk to 26 emergency doctors last week, specifically on changing states, because doctors need it just as much as anybody else. They are stressed, they're overworked, and they're liable to make mistakes just as much as anybody else when they're in that increased sympathetic drive. They're also prone to sleep disorders. So unfortunately, doctors, even though they have medical training, it doesn't mean that they have breathing training. And they need it just as much as the rest of us. I had asthma as a kid. I find it much more comfortable to breathe through my mouth. It's practice, Pat. Your mouth is not for breathing, straight out. And I would say my own background is asthma. That's how I came into it initially. It's terrible that there's no information put out there for people with asthma about encouraging them to breathe through the nose. Again, it's not just simple about practicing breathing through the nose. I would suggest that you look into the Buteyko method. It's tremendous method for asthma, and you'll get a lot out of it. How can I use it for cycling? Improve your everyday breathing, but also during low to moderate intensity, breathe in and out through the nose. Improve your bowl score, but it goes a lot more than this here. In terms of improving hemoglobin, which is the main carrier of oxygen in the blood, I don't think slow breathing would have done it, but if you were doing breath holding, it's more likely to do it. So slow breathing wouldn't. At my last doctor appointment, my blood pressure was high at first. I did 4x4 box breathing for a couple of minutes and tested down by 20 points to normal. He was shocked. Well, Bonnie, if you do a slow exhalation, you stimulate the vagus nerve. And if you practice this and bring it into your everyday life, don't do the long breath holds. So if you've got high blood pressure, well, maybe it was just that it might have been white coat syndrome, but if somebody has got high blood pressure, don't do any long breath holds. Instead, do light breathing and slow breathing and low breathing. And that will help to strengthen the barrel reflex. And by strengthening the barrel reflex, it can help to normalize both hypertension, but also hypotension. So what do you say to yoga teachers who are all about taking a deep breath? I think yoga teachers will get so much by coming in here and having a look at how the 3 dimensions of breathing, from a biochemical point of view and a biomechanical point of view and a resonance frequency point of view. I think yoga has an enormous potential to change lives. And it would be absolutely wonderful if yoga instructors knew the potential of breathing. They would change lives. And I don't mean this is not a criticism, but you know, there's so much more to breathing. And I've just scratched the surface here, just with the little talk here. The belt, I'm not sure how it fits in. I bought it too. It's to be placed around your midriff. I don't have one here to show you, Bruce. Placed around the midriff, and you tighten the belt, and it's really to bring in that sensory awareness, but also some restriction to your breathing. There should be some instruction on it. There are some demonstrations up on YouTube as well. So if you just put into YouTube, Buteyko belt, and you'll see the demonstrations there, and hopefully that helps you. That is a controlled mouth exhalation with a sound. That's fine. It's only practice, but Ruby is about breathing in and out through the nose during your everyday. A little bit of practice breathing in through the nose and pursed lip to create different sounds, etc. That's fine. Really, what we want is we want to look at your everyday breathing patterns. And it's about nose breathing. It's about light breathing. It's about slow breathing. And it's about low breathing. How to get the heart pounding when falling asleep. So I would think, Michael, that the key here is, well, first of all, just get a check from your medical doctor, just in case there's something else going on. But also stimulate the vagus nerve. If you can stimulate the vagus nerve and breathing light and breathing slow before you go to sleep. And as Daniel said, the last 15 to 20 minutes before sleep, down regulate, because you can influence the speed of your heartbeat by virtue of your breathing. And when you breathe light and slow and low, and you stimulate the vagus nerve, it secretes the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which causes a slowing of the heart. So I would like to say thanks very much to everybody. Sorry, there I'm 24 minutes over. Sometimes it's difficult to time it. I hope you've got something useful out of it. I think we will be putting this up onto YouTube. Sometimes we don't always know what to put up and what not to put up, but the best of luck, and thanks very much from Daniel and myself.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.